You think you have the rhythm of your life all figured out. You wake up, you follow the script, and you believe you know exactly how the next chapter ends. But sometimes, a single rainy evening can rewrite your entire story. What started as a simple gesture of help from a student turned into a moment that shook my world, challenged every boundary I'd ever set, and reminded me that life still has a few surprises hidden up its sleeve. Before we dive into today's story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. Also, drop a comment below and let us know which city you're listening from. It truly helps our community grow and allows us to share more of these human moments. Now, take a breath, get comfortable, and listen. I hadn't intended to be the last person leaving the literature department that Tuesday, but as any educator will tell you, the own last task is a ghost that haunts the halls. It quickly turns into a mountain of ungraded essays and a faculty meeting that dragged on until the sun had long since surrendered to the horizon. By the time I locked my office door, the campus had completely transformed. The bustling stone walkways were now silent, bathed in that deep, ink-blue twilight where the shadows of the ancient weeping willows seemed to stretch out, trying to reclaim the pavement. The air was sharp, carrying the salt and dampness of a coastal autumn as I walked toward the faculty lot. I pulled my wool coat tighter, already dreaming of a hot cup of Earl Grey and the silence of my apartment. But when I turned the key in my aging station wagon, the only response was a hollow, rhythmic clicking. The battery had finally given up. I sat there in the dark for a long minute, the silence of the car feeling heavy, pressing against my chest. Every ounce of the day's exhaustion seemed to settle into my bones. "Is everything all right, Dr. Vance?" The voice was steady, coming from the shadows near the edge of the lot. I looked up to see a young man standing there, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. It was Silas, a student from my advanced poetry seminar. Silas was one of those rare individuals who didn't just read words, he felt them. He possessed a quiet, grounded energy, a stillness that felt far older than his 24 years. "Oh, hello, Silas," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I'm afraid my car has decided its working day is over, even if mine isn't." He stepped closer, a polite, genuine smile softening his features. The dim street lamp caught the silver in his eyes. "I'm parked just a few rows down. The weather is turning, and the late-night shuttles are notoriously unreliable. I'd be more than happy to drive you home, Julianne." I hesitated. My professional armor told me to decline, to call a tow truck and wait in the cold. But the empty rain, slicked lot felt suddenly very vast, and Silas's presence felt anchored. There was an effortless honesty in the way he stood there that made my guard drop just an inch. "Are you sure? I don't want to be an inconvenience. It's no trouble at all," he replied softly. "I live near the harbor district anyway. It would be my pleasure." We walked together to his truck, the rhythmic splash of our footsteps on the wet asphalt providing a steady beat. As we pulled out of the university gates, the city lights began to blur into smears of amber and neon against the rain-streaked windshield. Silas was a deliberate driver, attentive and calm. Initially, we spoke of the syllabus and the upcoming midterms. But as the wipers cleared the glass in a hypnotic tempo, the conversation drifted into deeper waters. He asked me what had first drawn me to the written word, and for the first time in a decade, I wasn't answering as a professor. I was answering as the girl who used to hide in the library to escape the world. He listened with a profound, terrifying intensity. He didn't interrupt, he simply absorbed, his presence filling the small cabin of the truck with a warmth that I hadn't realized I was starved for. At a long red light overlooking the darkened bay, the silence between us shifted. It wasn't the silence of two strangers, but the heavy, charged recognition of two people seeing each other for the first time. I looked at him, the way the dashboard lights traced the sharp line of his jaw, the strength in his hands on the wheel. He turned to look at me, and for a heartbeat, the 15 years between us didn't feel like a canyon. It felt like a bridge. "Julianne," he said, his voice dropping to a low, resonant tone. "I hope this isn't overstepping, but I've spent a great deal of time thinking about the way you see the world. You speak about beauty as if it's a living thing. I wanted you to know that you are seen, not just as a teacher, but as the person behind the desk." My heart gave a sudden, sharp thud against my ribs. I had spent so long being the composed academic that I had forgotten what it felt like to be perceived as a woman with a pulse. There was no guile in his expression, just a raw, youthful sincerity that made my breath catch in my throat. "Thank you, Silas," I whispered, my hand moving instinctively toward his arm before I caught myself. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that tonight. The rest of the drive was quiet, but the air was electric. When we reached my driveway, the street lamps were casting a golden glow over the overgrown ivy on my porch. As I reached for my bag, his hand brushed mine. It was a brief contact, but it felt like a jolt of lightning, reigniting parts of my spirit that I had tucked away in the archives of my life years ago. "Good night, Julianne," he said. "Good night, Silas. Thank you for the rescue." The following morning, the world didn't look the same. The familiar routine of the department, the steam of the coffee, the drone of the copier, the student chatter, felt as if it had been color, graded into something more vibrant. I found myself looking for a specific face in the crowded hallways, my heart fluttering with a nervous energy I hadn't felt since my 20s. When I ran into him near the campus fountain later that afternoon, the atmosphere felt heavy with what hadn't been said. We spoke for a mere 60 seconds about a Hemingway passage, but the look in his eyes confirmed that the night before wasn't a hallucination. That evening, sitting in the quiet of my living room, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stepped outside the lines. I sent him a message. "If you're free this Thursday, I'd like to buy you that dinner I owe you for the ride." His reply came before I could even set the phone down. "I'll be there. Pick you up at 7. We met at a small, candle-lit bistro tucked away in a cobblestone alleyway far from the campus eye. Over glasses of dark red wine and the low hum of jazz, the masks we wore during the day began to slip. We talked about the fear of becoming stagnant, the beauty of a well-placed metaphor, and the strange way the universe brings people together when they least expect it. "I know what the world sees when they look at this," Silas said, leaning across the small table, his gaze locked onto mine. "They see a student and a professor. They see numbers on a birth certificate. But I don't care about the labels. I care about the way my mind feels when it's racing to keep up with yours. I feel like there's a language here that only we speak." I looked at him, feeling a sudden surge of bravery. I've spent my entire life following the syllabus, Silas. I've colored inside every line. But sitting here with you, I realize that the most beautiful parts of a story aren't the ones that are planned. They're the ones that happen when the author loses control of the pen. A few nights later, he drove me to a high cliffside overlooking the ocean. The waves were crashing against the rocks below, a symphony of white noise, and the wind was cold enough that we had to stand close, our shoulders touching. He took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine with a natural, unforced certainty. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like a mentor or an authority figure. I just felt human. "Julianne," he whispered into the salt air, "I don't know where this leads, and I don't care. I just want to walk the path with you. Then let's walk it." I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder as the lighthouse beam swept over us. That simple ride home had shattered the glass cage I'd built around my heart. It taught me that real connection doesn't follow a curriculum. It doesn't care about the expectations of society or the safety of the status quo. It only cares about two souls recognizing a familiar light in the darkness of a rainy evening. As I sit here tonight, writing these words while looking out at those same city lights, I realize that my life didn't reach its final chapter when I settled into my career. It was merely waiting for the right person to offer me a lift. Whether this journey lasts for a season or for the rest of my days, I am profoundly grateful. Because now I know that it is never too late to start a new volume, to feel a heartbeat with purpose, and to embrace the beautiful, unpredictable gifts that life sends our way when we finally stop looking at the map. Life is a series of unexpected turns. Don't be afraid to take the ride. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If this moved you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.